Fish. Hausman. Jones. McInerney. Parsons. Wells. Mayor Beasley.
Okay, looking for a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve. Second.
Got a motion from Fish, second by Wells, to approve, or Hausman, I'm sorry, to approve tonight's agenda. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next, we have the approval of the minutes for the January 11th briefing meeting, the January 11th special meeting, and the January 15th regular meeting, pages 3 through 9. I have a motion from Fish, second from Wells. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next, we will have item 5, approval of tonight's claims.
Motion to approve. Second.
Got a motion from Hausman, second from Parsons to approve the claims. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. 5A, under claims, we have the Brandon Development Foundation. All in favor?
Motion to approve.
Second? Second. Motion from McInerney, second from Hausman to approve.
Fish.
Sorry, Fish, to approve the Brandon Development Foundation. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. On the consent calendar tonight, we have a plat of Track 1A, Johnson's Edition, which you will find on pages 13 through 16. Looking for a motion.
Second.
Motion from Fish, second by McInerney to approve tonight's consent calendar. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next, we have item 7, which is visitors and timed items. Item 7A, public hearing to rezone Track 2, Westview Estates from general business to medium-density residential district. The address is 105 East Redwood Circle. And this is a first reading of ordinance number 561, which you will find on pages 17 through 22.
What are they going to be building there, since we're going to medium density? Do we know?
The plan is those 2 fourplexes as shown, but we're not reviewing the plan, I guess, tonight. What's showing on the plan on page 19,
Yeah, just like those other ones across from the fire department.
Are they going to have their own parking lot, or are we looking at parking on the street there?
I'm not sure, I mean, they have the parking for the driveways is shown in the garages. But without signing Redwood Circle, parking would be allowed. Just like any other residential street, it's just that this one's not built according to our residential street standard width. So that would raise some concern.
Yeah.
But then
I mean,
again,
my concern, like we talked about the other night, is I don't think you could get 2 cars down the street if someone's parked there. I'll rely on the seasoned veterans here, but
Yeah,
that's my first initial thought, is it's a little concerning.
it is very concerning.
If I may add to that, no matter what we build here, if this were not rezoned, I don't know what we would do to just say you can't park on Redwood Circle, we'd have to sign it, no parking, regardless of what's built.
And that would be addressed, correct, Paul, if when they brought the plans back to the city?
It could be a
For
point of
that.
discussion, for
Correct.
sure, during our review of the plans. At a minimum, we can point it out as a concern.
How would they do their parking then? If,
Well, the required parking would be included on the driveway and the garage, just like any other residential street or residential home or proposed building. Now, if you have families there that have kids that drive and they have more than 3 or 4 kids with vehicles, and they can't fit all the cars on the parking in the driveway, just like a regular street.
What is the required parking for a fourplex? Is it one stall per unit, or do you
I
know?
would have to look, do you know
Okay.
offhand, Brian? It's in our zoning ordinances.
Yeah, I'm not trying to drag it out. I'm just curious, because like you say, reality is there's going to be probably 2 to 3 additional cars per unit, aside from the stall. But like you said, Paul, I agree, no matter what you build there, you're still going to have probably parking on the street unless you permit it otherwise, so that's a tough one.
it is a tough one. But for right now, we're just doing
First reading.
the first reading of the rezoning.
In, residential streets, even though they're built at 37 feet, as you know, if you have 2 vehicles parked on either side of a street, it's fairly difficult to get 2 vehicles through there regardless. A lot of times you're moving over and trying to get out of another vehicle's way. In fact, it actually reduces speeds on some of our streets, but
Planning and zoning did pass it through, so I guess I'll rely on their wisdom. So I would make a motion to approve the first reading.
I have a motion from Fish, second by Wells. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Are there any other visitors and timed items tonight that anybody would like to discuss? Not seeing any, we will move on to committee reports. Item 8 is the golf course committee report. You'll see resolution number 318, adjusting the fees for 2018 on page 23.
This will allow the golf pro to set twilight special events and outing fees.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Motion from McInerney, second from Hausman. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Anything else, golf course? Barb just mentioned the TV's not functioning tonight. Evidently, we had an upgrade within the system that knocked it out, and they're in the process of trying to get it fixed. So, hence, I hope you guys have an agenda in front of you, and you're not going to be able to see what we have in front of us on the screen. So, I apologize. Anything else, golf course, Mr. McInerney?
Nobody's golfing in the snow?
I think last year in February they were.
Yeah, it was nice last February. So.
Well, according to the ground dog, we might be sitting it out for a while. Moving on to police committee report. We did go through the police report in briefing on Thursday. You'll see the inspection report. Chief, did you have anything else? Okay. That being said, nothing more under police, which moves us to park and recreation. Again, you'll see the work reports on page 29. And B, we have a first reading of ordinance 560, establishing and designating members of the tree board, which you will find on pages 30 and 31.
This ordinance transfers the duties of the tree board to the park and rec board or committee.
That removes my position off the tree board, so I'll make a motion to approve first reading.
She's feeling a little bitter. She's feeling a little bitter about that.
Okay, we got a motion from Hausman. Second by Mr. Parsons. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Anything else, Ms. Fish, under Park and Rec?
Thank you.
Okay, moving forward, we'll be moving to administration. 11A, appointing a council representative to the Planning and Zoning Commission. And it was my understanding that Mayor Beasley had appointed Mr. Parsons to that position. So is that going to require a motion?
Motion to approve.
Okay, I have a motion from Hausman, second by McInerney.
Congratulations, Chuck.
All those in favor? Opposed?
You're returning to the-
Motion carries. Congratulations, Chuck.
The circle isn't broken.
I know.
Does that sound good?
Next, we have the review of the liquor license fees. We did discuss this on Thursday, but we're opening it to discussion.
There's not really much to compare it to. Most cities don't have extra licenses like we do, and most of those are over the limit. So when you talk to other communities, they really don't have a number. Sioux Falls, I think, is at 175, if I remember correctly. You've got some out in Sturgis and Spearfish, which is a whole different ballgame. So I don't think that we can really look for other communities for guidance on setting our liquor license. The last liquor license that we sold, or new liquor license that we issued, was in 2001. That was to the golf course and the bowling alley. And that was, at that point in time, we were charging $1 per population, so that was $56.93 was the cost of those licenses. Depending on the census, the 2020 census, we probably should have one more liquor license that'll become available probably in 2021.
How do they base that?
They base
It's on
it
population. It's one license, I can't remember, it's 2 licenses for 5,000, and then it's 1 license for each 1,500 thereafter. So I'm anticipating that we'll be up from our 2010 census by at least 1,500, if not 3,000. So we'll have at least 1 license available, if not 2.
Plus the 3.
Plus the 3 that we already have.
Yeah.
Well, what sort of calculation could we use so that would be, as the population changes, it would change,
It
something
would
like
change with the
that?
census.
Change with the census.
It wouldn't change with any estimates. It's always based on the census. So we would set it for 10 years.
Well, I have never liked the price of $125. I've made that well known for many years. I think it's ridiculous, to be honest with you. Just like our New Mexican place came to town and they didn't buy a liquor license because of the fact that it was so expensive. I know some of the businesses in town that have one, but none of them paid this price for it ever. They were paying, like I said, $56.93 was the last one we sold, and that was in 2006. So maybe the sale of a transfer of a business, maybe, but literally, I don't know of any of them that paid that much. So based on some calculations we were doing before, I mean, do we do 10,000? Do we do 20,000? You know, do we do 50,000? I think that's a great place for discussion tonight. And what do you guys think? I personally think it should be about 20,000. Based on these calculations, we're calculating based on how many people are in town. So if we're even at 87.93, it's $1 per person. That would be 87.93. I think that's a little low. So I don't know. I'm up for discussion with it. But definitely, we need to move it down from the 125 and something so it's affordable, because we have a new restaurant coming to town eventually, and the restaurant that just came to town would like to be able to offer liquor, and they can't at the price that they're at now. So And I want to be able to say that we moved this price down so we can be more affordable. What do you guys think?
I agree it should be lower. My fear has always been setting it too low and kind of not having the threshold or the hurdle for these businesses to meet to kind of, that would want to buy one. So my fear is if you set it 10 grand, 5 grand, you're just going to get all these video lottery cafes that want one and just go in and grab the licenses. So I guess I'd like to understand better, and Lisa, I don't know if you want to speak to it, is what say the council has and when the business applies for one in making our determination. Because I assume we have to have a very good basis for denying one if we did, in that scenario.
I can't say, I can directly answer your question other than to say, John, that it couldn't be arbitrary and capricious. And what does that mean? I mean, you're going to have a legitimate reason to deny it. I could give you a better answer next meeting. It wasn't something I was asked to look at. You have to have a reason to deny it. And in the past, we've denied them on, business plan and development and scope of who they're going to reach and what type of income we think we're going to get or receive from the sales. So you have some discretion in doing it, as well as their background. Do they have prior sales to underage, responsibility, things like that? Because there's several things that we include that they have to be able to provide to us. So there's a number of different criteria you can use to give you a complete listing of that. I couldn't do that tonight.
Yeah, because I've never really viewed the liquor license fee as a revenue source for the city, and that should be any of the determinations. Really, what types of businesses are you attracting and the incremental tax revenue that you're going to get in perpetuity from that. So I don't view it as, okay, if we set it at 10, we're just now, I don't care between that, whether it's 10 or 20 or 50 or 80, that the revenue to the city from just that fee. It's more about tracking the right businesses that are sustainable and provide a better tax revenue source. So I agree 125 I think is too high. I don't know where the right number is in my mind. I don't 50, 60, 70, somewhere around there, but there's no science behind that. The one thing you could do is just, initially we drop it from 125 to 75 or 60 or 50, see how that goes for a year. So if you don't get a lot of interest there, you can continue to kind of decrease that and eventually kind of find out where that sweet spot might lie. We are at the benefit of, we do have a couple of these to provide some of those learnings, but at the same time you want to be fair to the businesses that come first, right? Because you hate to keep lowering it on them, because then they're at a competitive disadvantage for the new businesses that come in and pay the lower fee. So,
And I guess, as history has shown, the 125, I agree, is too high. But I was part of the council when we took this on and came up with that number. And believe me, it wasn't something that we had taken lightly. We worked on it for a long time before we finally came up with that number. And we ran into the same problem that we're running into right now. And that's, how do you figure out what that number is? And Bob Brunig, in his ultimate wisdom at the time, put an awful lot of work into it and met with the folks that had liquor licenses here in town right now and just said, what is this liquor license worth to you? And how can you show me what this liquor license is worth to you? And that's what it boiled down to, and that's where we came up with that 125. So, and I agree, we've got liquor licenses that are sitting there that haven't gone, and that's certainly not what we want in our city. But I would like to think that we can come up with some form of attack or some form of wisdom instead of coming up with just an arbitrary number to apply to this, because it is the future of our city. It isn't something that we want to look at every 2 or 3 years and we want to move it or we want to change it. We need it to make sense. Now, how do you do that? And that's what this council is up against again tonight. So I guess I'm certainly willing to listen to anything. But my personal opinion is we just can't pull a number out of the air and say this is what we think it should be. So this is probably the wrong terminology, but if there's a science that applies to this, that's what we need to find to be able to come up with that number. So I would thank you, Joe, for bringing it up and opening it up again. I don't know that I'm ready to vote towards a number yet until we can try to figure that out. We've had Brian working diligently to try to get some information for us. And to be honest with you, it's just not out there. And some of the information that is out there, people aren't willing to share. So I don't know what our next steps are, but that would certainly be my hope, that we could somehow come up with a number that makes sense for the city of Brandon, that's not just an arbitrary number pulled out of the air.
Brian, how did you do it when you were in Minnesota and Iowa?
They're set by state statute. Cities don't have a choice. It's a little easier.
Well, do you remember what it was?
I can't, 5,000, 7,500 bucks.
Pretty low.
Yeah.
Based on city population. I don't know.
I like to do it like a factor times, the population, so I don't know what that number is. Is it 3 times 10,000 or 4 times 10,000? Something that would,
Yeah, 5 times.
that's not scientific though either.
I
Well,
don't think there is scientific.
that's what I said. That's probably the wrong terminology. We just,
Find a number and agree on it. I mean, really.
I'd like to know if there's anybody in the audience from the industry that has anything to say. Any comments? I would love to hear it. Any information is good information.
if you could just push the purple button, introduce yourself.
Okay, so I'm TJ Cameron, and I'm from here in Brandon. I used to own the bowling alley. And I was part of the discussions when the reevaluation of the prices came to the front, and they came down and asked me, Bob asked, what do we think we'd value it at? Well, I can tell you one thing, having ran a business and done well, but then not making it, is that one, when new businesses come into town, the liquor license, most banks, or at least for sure if it's state funded, like the SBA, won't lend on the value of the liquor license. So you'll create somewhat of a roadblock. I found that out while I was trying to go through the SBA process. They won't value it. It has to be part of the business value instead. So that was one thing that I learned throughout that process. I've thought about this, and I saw it on the agenda tonight, and another thing that I would say could be an idea is if you took a population multiple, and then to help the type of business that's coming to town, you could do some kind of small fee based on, net receipts for the liquor to make sure that it's reasonable, but it's low cost for entry, and then it would carry some kind of value that way. I mean, I wouldn't get, crazy, because obviously people who have already bought their license, we have to be conscious of that. But
You're talking an annual
yes,
number? Okay.
I knowing that I had a liquor license would have potentially been open to that, to ensure that, it's not 5 or 6 of a certain business right next to me or something like that. Because, somebody like an Applebee's, a nice restaurant, some of the places here in town that hold liquor licenses now that serve food and beverages are, I think, might be open to it a little bit, just to keep the right balance coming in. I'm happy to answer any questions too, based on my experience from that.
And I know I haven't spoke with you before tonight, so roughly what percentage of your revenue is from liquor sales? And granted, I understand a casino and a restaurant and a bowling alley.
Right.
It's all going to vary, but like I say, any information helps.
So total beverage sales, including beer and liquor for the bowling alley, was approximately 55%. A smaller portion than half of that was liquor, though. I was actually somewhat surprised. Of that, probably only 30% was liquor sales. So it was actually significantly less than I expected it to be compared to like a full bar setting. But of course, we remodeled and served, full menu of food. And I think that made a difference also. We didn't have much bowling revenue per se, so it's mostly based on the restaurant.
Sure, right, yep.
Thank you, TJ. It's good to know about the SBA. I didn't realize
Yeah.
that. So they don't loan on liquor licenses.
At least at the time, my understanding was they wouldn't. And I know maybe somebody else can share insight from a banking perspective, but I know the SBA would not value it when I was trying to refinance a balloon payment.
It's basically not a hard asset, right? You could
Yeah.
lose it at any time and and not recover it, so.
It would definitely be a significant roadblock, though, for a new startup, you know, having to come up with an extra 100K
Yeah, we know.
cash.
That's why we're lowering it.
Yeah, and I think, you know, at the time, of course, owning a liquor license at the time, I had paid more. Now, it wasn't on paper that way, but of course, the liquor revenue was a value of my business when I purchased it. So I had to, you know, I'd come up with somewhat of an estimate and said, you know, it's got to be worth somewhere between 50 and 150. And it was hard to value because it was only based on the revenue that I was producing, but not for a startup. That was a you know, an established business somewhat. I know we completely remodeled, but it was established. So I would say for a startup, it's a lot different. Okay.
Thanks,
Yeah,
TJ.
if you have any other questions, I'd be happy to.
Well, based on that information, I'm gonna do some calling and do some checking, and then let's put it back on the agenda in 2 weeks, and then I'll have more information. Yeah.
Sounds good.
We'd like to check that off the agenda, right?
Eventually, it
Well-
would be nice.
Joe, I'd be happy to talk to you more too if you have.
Okay, that would be good too. Yeah, that, eventually, we're gonna mark this baby off and we'll be done with it.
Okay, moving on to 11C, we're going to declare surplus the the design jet printer, which you will find on page 32.
The other thing to sign. I'll make a motion. Raise it to surplus at 400.
Okay, we have a motion from Hausman, second from Parsons to make it at less than 400. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, moving on to item 12, street committee report. The maintenance work report you'll find on page 33. We will move on to item B, township request for maintenance help on Chestnut and Redwood, found on pages 34 and 36. I will turn that over to Brian.
Brandon Township has approached us and asked us if we'd be willing to help them maintain primarily East Redwood and Chestnut. On page 34, they've got a breakdown of their costs per mile for their township roads that they currently maintain. The cost per mile for Chestnut and Redwood, East Chestnut and Redwood, is $11,448. Their contention is that they have a significant amount of city traffic on those roads, and they have a very difficult time. If anybody's driven them, they have a difficult time maintaining it. It's very washboarded. On pages 35 and 36, the county performed a traffic count on East Redwood and West Redwood. They are going to redo those. Looking at previous traffic counts, I think they've got them switched around. Historically, if memory serves me correctly, East Redwood usually has 600 plus cars a day on it. This one shows 243, and then West Redwood, they've got it 605 cars. So they're going to redo those traffic counts to verify. But at this point in time, the township is just asking us if we'd be willing to sit down and talk to them and possibly work out a maintenance agreement or maintenance payment with them to maintain those roadways.
And I just want to clarify for the council, you do not have a legal obligation to do so. They receive funds to maintain their roads. They're just asking at this juncture if you would be willing to contribute towards maintaining those roads. But there's no legal obligation to do so.
Is that an annual cost, the 11,400?
That's what they paid in 2017. They broke it down by the loads of gravel that were hauled onto it as well as blading hours.
I guess what I'd like to understand is, and I don't know if it comes from a discussion with them, but if the city's going to contribute in any way to the financial support of this, is there going to be improvements made in terms of how often it happens, the quality of the road? Because to your point, I drive it all the time and it's terrible. So, you know, if we're going to contribute financially, I'd like to see at least a benefit to our citizens from that in the way of improving the road and the way it's maintained.
And I guess my request would be, we did talk about this in briefing, would be to invite those folks to one of our meetings where we could have an open discussion with them before we move forward.
What's the long-term plan on that road? I know with the school out there in 10, 15 years, what's the long-term plan of, because they can't have a school out there, right, with a gravel road? Or does it need to be paved by then, or?
I don't think there's anything that prohibits them. They've got some other access issues to the school site because it's in kind of the middle of the quarter section. As far as long-term plans, we, the city, have always taken the approach that we aren't going to bring folks into the city by forced annexation. It's always been voluntary annexation. So until, those properties on either side of that road are into the city limits, at least this has been the historical discussion, it would remain a gravel road until we annexed it by voluntary annexation.
Any other discussion?
When is the traffic study? Sorry, did you say?
I think they were going to start it today or tomorrow.
So we'll know in 2 weeks.
Yep.
Okay, we will move on to item C, Holly Boulevard project discussion.
We've talked about this a couple times at council. We've been meeting with Stockwell Engineers and following a schedule that we would like to achieve in order to get bids out and get construction started. Obviously, with the bidding process, the tendency is that earlier that you can get a bid out, the better our prices are going to be. There's some holdup on the contracts and the planning with the Ellison Eastern, and then also the hydraulic study upstream from where we're filling into the floodway in the Big Sioux River. And it's looking like, and you can add to this, Brent, but it's looking like it would be in our best interest to delay the Holly Boulevard construction portion of that project, still continuing with the sanitary sewer trunk main replacement south to Aspen Boulevard.
Yep.
So that, in short, that would be our recommendation at this point, is to hold off on the Holly Boulevard portion of the project. Like I had mentioned in the sanitary sewer replacement portion, we feel like we can divert traffic around the actual construction zone in a safe manner, that we wouldn't have to close Holly Boulevard down during the sanitary sewer crossing on Holly.
Right.
On Sioux, that might be a little different.
Right, no, we're gonna have to close Sioux down right now, that's the preliminary plan. One other thing, Brent Anderson with Stockwell Engineers, one other thing I might add that we've learned in the past few weeks is there's gonna be significant amount of utilities along Holly that are gonna have to be relocated, which could also produce a delay. Quite a few of those are in an easement, which means the city would have to pay for the relocation. So we're in the process of working with them to try to develop costs of what they need to do and how much that's going to be.
Those are private utilities, mainly overhead power.
Correct.
Correct?
Yep. It'd be East River and XL Energy. So that's a third potential delay as opposed to the DOT contracts and then this hydraulic analysis. But we're very confident the plans can be done and we can bid the sanitary sewer trunk line. We're thinking late March. Still have competitive bids. So again, it would be our recommendation as well as we break Holly apart, move forward with the trunk line sewer.
Brent, do we think that there's going to be significant extra costs by splitting those projects up, or basically the same thing?
No, I don't think so. And as Paul may have discussed in the briefing meeting, it's actually going to be two different contractors. That's probably going to be focused on a concrete contractor for Holly, where it's probably going to be a utility contractor for the trunk line sewer. So in theory, you might get better bids. Instead of one being a sub to another and marking them up, it's two separate projects. And the Holly Boulevard is actually a nice concrete project with a small amount of utilities to it, so.
So we're saying 2019 for that?
Well, we had talked also at the briefing meeting on Thursday night that if we could wait potentially even until 2020, when exit 402 is done with construction, Highway 100, then we could potentially have less of a conflict just from a traffic impact point. We can add maybe another access for detouring traffic
Right,
at that time.
Make it
right. Because
Well,
when Holly
it's
does.
still gonna be an inconvenience. I
It
mean,
is.
if
It's
we
gonna be an
close Holly Boulevard down.
yeah.
There's gonna be a 4-week period where we have to close it for the crossing, so whether that's 19 or 20, it's gonna happen, or 18.
So what are you thinking on Sioux? We might have to close Sioux for a while?
Just to get across it, 3 to 5 days maximum. And then Aspen, we're gonna have to cross as well. That's gonna take a little longer, because there's some more facilities there, but I would say 10 days maximum. So it's not gonna be a significant amount of time. And we've worked with the school, we've met with the school about buses and detours, and so we're comfortable we can make it happen.
Any other discussion?
Thanks for all your work on it.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Thanks, Brent.
That includes D on the
Yeah.
agenda as well.
Yep.
Okay.
So at this point in time, we will proceed with we'll take off the Holly reconstruction part of the project. Okay.
Okay. Moving on to,
That-
it's just gonna delay their unhappiness, I'm afraid.
At least it's the first year there.
Moving on to item 13, Water and Sewer Committee Report. Item A, Water Development Committee Report, and recommendations to proceed with the water tower design. Mr. Wells.
Okay, so the Water Committee met several weeks ago now. We had a little bit of a vacation with the extra week in here. I'll try and keep it brief. Number one, we came up with a Water Conservation Committee. Patrick Deering and Angie Numbers are going to co-chair that committee. Thus far, the members are members of the Water Development Committee, therefore no further approval is required. That's my understanding anyway. Is that still correct? Okay. As far as if there's going to be any additional members from community, I'm leaving that up to the Conservation Committee to move forward with that and come up with their own agenda. So we wanted to make sure that we had this Water Conservation Committee up and running ASAP. So they have already started discussions, and I don't know when their first official meeting is. I don't think they have it set yet. Yeah. They did meet last week. Oh, okay. I didn't know that. Didn't hear anything from it. Good. So there we have it. We're moving forward with the Conservation Committee. I think our main concern there was to have it up and running by summer, which obviously they met that, so that we don't end up in a bind again. The second thing we talked about was the update to the Stockwell study for the 2017. Brian, do you know where we're at with that?
Not yet. Should be able to finish it up fairly quickly, according to either John or Ryan, about a month.
Okay. So from there, we went into discussions as far as why are we here? What is our agenda? What's our purpose? What do we hope to accomplish as a Water Development Committee? And we came up with the fact that we want to establish short-term goals and long-term goals, as well as intermediate goals. Short-term being 3 to 5 years-ish. Long-term being 30 to 50 years, because we feel that we don't necessarily have a firm, long-term plan in place for our water system and sources and treatment and that type of thing. So the recommendations made for those goals are going to be ongoing throughout the summer. We hope to have them done by the end of the summer. But for now, we've at least established a timeline and some identifiable points that we want to cover. So from there, we talked about the RFP for additional water sources. We talked about the fact we want to keep it somewhat broad so that engineering firms can respond with maybe ideas that we have not discussed yet. So Brian, we where are we at with the RFP, or do you want to make that announcement?
The RFP is ready to be looked at tonight and authorized.
It's actually item B, so we will look at that next.
Okay. We will also look over the RFP at tomorrow's Water Committee meeting, so. As far as additional water sources, we want to look at additional wells or connections to whether it's MCWC or Sioux Falls. We don't want to leave anything out in the cold, so. From there, we need to establish what our quality standards are going to be. And that is something that we have not discussed yet. That's going to be a tough discussion and it might take some time, but we'll get there. From there, we went on to talk about, how frequent are we going to meet as a water committee. We wanted to make sure people were aware that we will be meeting on a regular basis through the peak season, which is the summer, as well as the Conservation Committee. So for now, we are going to move forward every other week with meetings. We hope to taper those off as we get responses to this RFP and get some plans in action. Again, we want to, the Water Development Committee is not there to make the decisions. That's for the professionals, the engineering firms. We're just there to try and manage that process. So through the course of the next year, we hope to taper off our frequency as far as how often we're going to meet. So, I talked to Jay Gilbertson from the East Dakota Water District. He actually attends our meetings now on a regular basis, which is very nice of him. But we talked about the fact that there might be some possible funding for future projects, whether it be a study or maybe even the Water Conservation Committee. We might be able to get some funding from the East Dakota Water District. And that's not written in stone. I don't want to make any promises, but that is something we're pursuing. So that's not something that has been taken advantage of in the past. So I'm hoping that we can explore a new avenue for some funding, which would be fantastic. From there, the 2 water towers, we talked about going ahead and pursuing bids for the construction of the 2 water towers. There were concerns from residents and committee members about the fact that do we need 2 water towers? And as we have talked about, the recommendation nowadays is to have 1 day of storage. And that's, if you look at the capacity of the 2 towers, that gives us our 1 day of storage. It increased our ability to not only provide water to the residents, but also for fire protection and et cetera. So we did go ahead and approve to move forward with bids for the 2 water towers. Keeping in mind, this was just kind of a side note, the city has received or has been approved from CCOG, was it 12 million? Is that correct, Brian?
We have in the state revolving loan fund, up to 12 million.
Up to 12 million.
Identified in the
Okay.
2013 facility
Okay.
plan.
That CCOG kind of manages for
Yep.
us. So, my first question was, do we need to do a peer review of the design of the towers? And I reached out to a few engineering firms. They said that's not necessarily something that they I guess the way they put it was that was a pretty straightforward design or process. They recommended more so that we create a peer review for our water system. In other words, pressures and zones throughout the city. Have you heard back from Stockwell on whether that property is ours or not? Okay. We will be discussing that further tomorrow, the peer review process. From there, we talked about proceeding with a gamma log test of well 7. Well 7 is still a concern that the test results came in a little higher than expected. So we were looking at doing a gamma log. A gamma log kind of gives you information on the hot spots of the entire depth of the well. Okay. Derek Isles down in Vermilion was initially, we thought, might do this gamma log test for us, and he has stated that he can't because it's a conflict of interest. I won't go into it, but they're not able to do it. So I have been in contact with Dick Hammond, and Pat Hammond as well is helping me with this. we're trying to get a company out of Minnesota to do this. I think it's pertinent information. We need to discuss the next step with Well 7, if there is a next step. So anyway, we'll be discussing that again tomorrow as well. Tomorrow's meeting, we're going to be taking a tour of the plant. We're going to be looking at a well, maybe a pump house. It's going to be just kind of an eye-opening experience for some that we're going to spend 45 minutes to an hour out at the plant asking questions, how things work, just so we have a solid understanding of how our current system is set up. So, and with that, that's about it.
So are you bringing forth that recommendation on the water towers?
We are. Yep. So the committee is, I don't know if you want to go into that now?
Brian, do we need a motion on it?
What's that?
We'll need a motion.
Okay. So the committee, moving on to 13B here, the committee did come forward and say we recommend to the council that we move forward with the tower designs.
So you're making a motion?
So I will make a motion to proceed with
Okay.
the tower designs.
We have a motion from Wells, second from Hausman to move forward with the tower designs. Any other further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to item B, review draft of the RFP for additional water sources.
So it's completed and it's been sent out today to you for review. Lisa's looking at it as well and reviewing it, so she'll probably have some changes. I don't want to speak for you.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I got it at 5:30. I've been looking at it right now. I have some changes. Nothing too substantive, but there are a couple.
So we'll be,
So is it something we can go ahead and say we will do it with changes, or we have to wait?
We're not awarding any contract, it's just a request for proposal, so I'm comfortable making the changes and then having you send it out. We're not paying for anything, so we're just requesting proposals from other entities, so
So we can move forward.
I think you can move forward.
okay, we'll be looking for a motion then.
So, real quick, Paul, are we still going to come up with a committee for the RFP approval process?
Yeah, that selection committee still has to be completed.
Established, right,
Right.
right, yep.
Yep.
I just want to make that, kind of make that clear, that that was something we discussed, is coming up with a committee to award the contract for this RFP, and we feel like that maybe should be made up of some city council members, maybe some staff, maybe some water development committee members, and further, I don't know.
Well, the contract's going to have to be approved by the city council.
Right.
So this committee that you're talking about, you can certainly have a committee make a recommendation.
To make a recommendation,
Right.
yep,
But
yep.
the
Did I
ultimate
miss?
contract will have
Okay,
to be voted.
I may have misspoke, that, yeah, that's,
Yeah, the typical process, the RFP process, is that engineering firms and their teams will get the information from the request for proposal, and then they'll submit their proposal to the city of Brandon.
Right.
Which is defined in the RFP, where they send it to and who gets asked questions. As consulting firms and their teams ask questions, those get posted online where they can all view those questions, and if there's any changes to the RFP due to those, we make sure we get that out to everybody that is submitting an RFP. And then once they're submitted, and our selection committee is made up of a group of people that go through the interview process, once we basically dwindle the
narrow it down to maybe
proposals
3,
down,
right?
And that can be decided still how many
Yeah.
interviewed firms we want.
And I understand that's down the road, I just want to kind of verbalize what we were thinking there, so. Anyway, with that, I'll make a motion to approve and move forward with the RFP.
Second.
A motion from Wells, second from Fish to move forward with the RFP. Any further discussion?
I mean, is there a thing about putting a committee together to recommend one of the various companies or proposals that we get to the council?
Well,
as a-
the city doesn't feel comfortable awarding that contract, and maybe I'm speaking out of terms, but with everything that's gone on, the city would rather involve us and committee members to come up with a decision of who this contract is awarded to. And quite honestly, I think it's a good idea.
Yeah, I'm okay with all that. It'd be difficult to vote on something like that without understanding what the original options were, even to begin with. You know, how do I ask questions about it? How do I get knowledgeable about it? How do I make a yes/no decision without understanding all the same material that all you folks had access to and had the ability to ask those questions? I don't want to get in the same spot that Sioux Falls was just in, basically, where you're just bringing forward some of the council and it's basically a rubber stamp yes. I mean, we need to have the information too to pose the right questions and make sure that we're making the appropriate decision there.
Sure. So if we incorporate this into our water committee meetings, this will all be recorded and viewable by everyone. There will be meeting minutes to review as well. I think that's a good point, and maybe we should make sure that we have that on record, on video, so that everyone does have access to that information.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to item C, review of the chemical bids, find on page 37 and 38.
We opened bids last week. Recommendation for Public Works is to award to Hawkins Chemical, the Tonka Zorb LPC 5, LPC 9, Aqua Hawk 957, sodium hypochlorite and granular chlorine, and then award to DPC the gas chlorine cylinders and potassium permanganate bids. So it's a split bid, typically what we do.
Okay. I'll make a motion to approve.
Motion from Wells, second from Hausman to award those bids. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, sanitary force main, South Dakota Highway 11 reroute. We've talked about this numerous times, but let's...
This contract was for the construction administration for the Highway 100. It's our force main that goes to Sioux Falls, and because of the construction of Highway 100 and relocation of Rice Street alignment, our sanitary sewer is being relocated along with the city of Sioux Falls, which run parallel to each other. So that's what the contract is for, and this is also reimbursed by the state because it is their project.
That's what we like to hear. I'll make a motion to.
Can I just ask a question? So Paul, is this something that would be beyond your scope of, to do this?
Do the construction admin.
Yeah.
Any project that we have that requires basically an entire day of being on a project and doing
Paul,
construction admin.
your mic shut off.
Thank you. Anytime you have a project like this that requires an engineer to be on site for long periods of time, it's not just watching the project, you're making sure that it's being done according to plans and specifications, keeping track of the weather and the quantities on a daily basis. It's pretty difficult for us to man a project like this.
When you have all your other stuff.
Yep.
All right, I'll make a motion
So
to
move.
approve.
Second.
I have a motion from Hausman, second by Wells. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, sewer line on 1300 block of Rushmore. Welcome, clerks.
So, yeah, I'd like to speak to this. I think I spoke a little bit the other night, but I just wanted to address the council real quick on this one. After receiving their email the other day, after their incident has happened again, I went out and visited the premises, and I'd like us to move forward with this. I know this was planned for 2019. I'd like to move forward with this year. These folks, you know, they're this business in our community. They're getting the raw end of the deal here. They're having sewer backups. For those of you who don't know, they're having sewer backups, and we don't know for sure what the cause is. They currently have a 6-inch old clay pipe in the ground. Number one. Number two, it was a a pipe that was put in underneath the building, so the building was built on top of the pipe, which can cause some issues, some sag and whatnot. We also believe there may be some elevation problems involved. We don't know what the real cause of the problem is, but we feel, I've spoken with everyone in the city staff as well as some plumbers about this, and everybody seems to feel pretty confident that if we do put this new line in, which is an 8-inch rather than a 6-inch, it'll be sloped appropriate, it won't be put in underneath the building, et cetera. We feel that, I think, like Paul said the other night, there's probably a 99% chance that this will cure their problem. This has been going on for years for these folks. They keep getting kind of pushed back a little bit, and I feel like they deserve to get this done this year. So I'd like to ask the council to join me in this, and let's move forward with this year.
Do we, and I am too, because that's not a fun problem to have. Do we know what the cost is going to be, and to do all this over here, since we're not doing the Holly project? I mean,
Go ahead.
He's probably going to say the same thing I did. I talked to Paul about that. If we budgeted the money for this Holly project, we're not using it. That is actually a result of state funds. So this is kind of a different basket of money. But roughly, we're thinking $200,000 to $300,000. Is that correct?
Well, I had several options in that memo that I had written, knowing that we were going to be talking about this the last council meeting. They're based on construction of a street as well. It's not, if we're going to reconstruct a sanitary sewer main in this area,
Might as well do this.
in my opinion, you don't want to start, this is the uphill end of the system, and we want to start like we were in a good fashion when we were doing Sylvan Circle. That you want to start at the bottom and work your way up, and this is at the top. So this was in the plans in the future for reconstruction. It just wasn't planned at this time.
This year,
it wasn't in sequence with our plan to reconstruct Sylvan Circle. We were going to move next year into Sylvan Circle and the old chamber building area and finish that block off. We had actually proposed that as a part of our project that we were going to do this last summer, but it got to be too big, so we pushed that part of the project out, which is typically what we do when we get into a project and the costs get too high. We
Right.
try to break
The
them up.
problem they're having, again, I started to say this, but the problem they're having with this sewer backup, they've got several. How many residents are in your building? 4 businesses. Okay. Okay. So I went in the day after this happened. The whole basement was, or I shouldn't say the whole basement. The basement was flooded with sewer, and so they had to disinfect with bleach, and the whole building smelled. And it's problematic for them, for not only for them, for the tenants, and their tenants are complaining about it. And again, it's been something going on for years now, and
So is it something we can rejigger then the priorities? Is that what we're talking about?
I mean, that's something we haven't had, it's not in the plan, but it could certainly, we could certainly take a look at it, and that's probably a better question for Brian as far as the funding part of it. But I would also add to this that it's February, and if we move forward with the project now into design, we got to get into contractual agreement with somebody and move forward with the design. We can take a look at the different options a little closer, that we wouldn't have to include the street project. I just don't recommend that we do that. Also have to have buy-in with the adjacent property owners, because there will be easements that we will be needing to get to run this sewer. If we go between buildings, which is where it should be, we need to get agreements with property owners as well. Regardless, I think what we do, and Raleigh can add to this too, but those sewer services come out in between buildings, so we have to get to the sewer services in order to replace the main line as well.
So I guess what I'm asking from the council is this doable this year? And if so, what would the funding be, and can we afford to do it this year?
And I can answer to the timing again. It's February. By the time we get somebody on contract and actually start design, it's probably a 2-month design minimum. So, and that's pushing it. We're looking at March, April, maybe bidding it in May, starting construction at the earliest June, July. And then we have about 4 to 5 months to get it constructed before winter.
So in other words, if we're going to do it, we need to make a decision and move forward now, yeah.
We're getting late in the year, I mean,
Right.
late enough for the bidding process.
And that, and that's, I'm being optimistic, and
Sure.
like I said, if we really wanted to move forward with the project, that is a legitimate timeline.
Yeah.
So in other words, what I'm hearing you say, Paul, in layman's terms, it is doable, but we need to act.
We would need to
now.
get moving on it, yep, for sure.
So with that, I would say, ask for a motion to approve this.
We gotta figure out where we gonna, how we're gonna pay for it. So I mean, that would be one,
We'll need to borrow the money, just like we were gonna borrow everything for the Holly project except for the STIP funding. So the money would need to be borrowed.
So I guess we could probably be looking at a motion to move forward with design. Is that
With
where we need
design,
to start?
yeah.
Paul?
Yeah, at a minimum, what I would do is enter into we haven't even discussed this, I guess, but a preliminary design, get it to 30% complete with some sort of a schedule and cost estimates that are a little tighter than what I've come up with. Because it wouldn't take, I mean, just to feasibly take a look at a schedule and be comfortable with the project this year so that we're not pushing into a November construction timeframe, I think it would be worth at a minimum to do that.
Okay, so what type of motion, I guess we're asking,
Yeah,
what type of motion are we
I know.
looking for here? What do we need to do
We
to
could
move forward?
what do you think, Brian? We could do a preliminary design and with the construction.
No, what we're looking at is getting a proposal from Stockwell's, unless you want to go out to some other engineering firm. And included in that would be cost estimates for the work, the various options that Paul looked at, how long it's going to take. You know, give us a schedule, how fast can you get these plans done, what's a reasonable bidding date, and then once completion starts, how long it's going to take to get the project done. So that would be the first step, sit down with Stockwell's and get a proposal put together.
I will make a motion to do exactly that.
Yeah,
meet with
I guess I'm
Stockwell's and move
confused
forward.
as to what exactly we need to do here.
Well, typically with the construction project, we're looking at preliminary design, final design with including construction documents, bid documents. What you'd be looking at here is retaining an engineer to give us a construction schedule.
I'm sorry, I don't mean that. I mean with respect to tonight. I mean, can we proceed with a motion for the design? Is that what we're?
I would hesitate to do that. You do not have a cost. We don't have a proposal. We don't have a contract in front of us from an engineering firm to do that work.
Okay.
The best you can do tonight is if you want to do a motion, authorize staff to work with the engineer to get a contract proposal ready to go for your review at the next council meeting. But there's no contract to look at right at the moment.
Sure. Yeah, that's why I'm asking. I don't know. I mean, it was planned for 2019. Can we say we want to move forward with this in 2018 or?
What we could do is just meet with Stockwell, if that's what we wanted to do, and come up with a proposal and a timeline for design and construction at a minimum, and then potentially at the next meeting, then we can move forward with an actual contract.
Perfect, let's do that. I make a motion what you said.
I'll just pull my motion
Yeah.
and,
Yeah, I don't think we need a motion. If you're authorizing us to just go
Yes.
talk with
We can talk to
Stockwell
Stockwell's and
to
get a proposal.
get a proposal put together, I think having a realistic time frame and a schedule to see that this is even feasible would be
Yeah.
well worth it.
Because we can't just vote on it and just vote out in the open. We have to have some kind of, we gotta know money, we got no time frame, we got, and like you said, it's getting later in the season for bidding, so we have to get this taken care of, but
just so you know, we really truly do want to get this done for you folks, so we just need to figure out how best to do that, so.
Yeah, I assume that since this was planned for 19, maybe, yeah, so at any rate, will this help? I mean, is this a good first step for you folks? That's my question. Because that's what matters.
Yeah, I think this is a good first step, and then there's gonna be a follow-up on the next council meeting, right? After you talk with Stockwell. And you'll have more answers. At that point, you'll potentially be able to make a motion on doing the repair.
Right.
Yeah. By next meeting.
Yeah, we just don't have enough information tonight to make that type of decision. I don't know what projects we're prioritizing now behind this and pushing out. What's our incremental cost as a city to the citizens as a result of accelerating this, carrying the, by bar, there's just so many questions I'd have to even make a decision that's best for everybody. There's not one of us that doesn't empathize and feels, sick about this and want to get it resolved, but at the same time, we have a responsibility to the entire city to make sure we're
Right, staying on
responsible
task.
with the taxpayers' dollars, so.
So did we vote?
I don't think we
No, we just-
finished it.
You don't need to,
don't need it? Okay.
staff will just talk to
So we just
Stockwell,
move
get a
forward.
proposal
Okay.
for you to look at the next
Okay.
meeting.
So, Paul, what did we find on the videotaping or videoing of the lines? Did we find that we have a grease issue, or what was found there?
I think Raleigh can answer that question better. The-
When we did the videoing of the lines, did we determine there's a grease issue or not? What did we find?
Raleigh, could you come up?
Yeah, when we went through the line, we had two companies come out trying to go through the lines. The camera was big enough that neither one of them could get underneath of the line going east of their building. Did get underneath the line that goes by their building. We found nothing in there. There's one protruding tap a little bit. It's not blocking flow. It's coming off of the top, I would say around 10 o'clock coming into the pipe. So it's not blocking flow. You can tell there's been some grease in there, but under their building, it's not, a very high flow line in there. Very low flow when we were going through it. And one minor sag that went approximately 6 feet, I would guess 6, 7 feet. Very minor. It's not causing any problems that way. But going under the line to the east, we had to use our camera, and you can see that pipe has had some issues with the grease built up on the pipe all the way up to almost 12 o'clock, both sides. So now, whether that was in the past, our machine does a pretty good job of cleaning it, but it's not perfect. Didn't see any tree roots, no protruding taps on that side. So can I say what it was exactly what's happened? I mean, this is one stretch of 160 feet one way and another 175 feet of pipe in one way. So a total of about 335 feet, and it's probably the cleanest in town. It's been cleaned the most in town, and it's given me the most heartburn, so.
So can we then say that our businesses are not the main contributing factor to this problem, our restaurants?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that, it's kind of dependent. You can get that we get it in lift stations down where there are no businesses. Park Street, for example, one of our worst lift stations for grease that builds up there. The school has grease traps, they clean them every 6 months. So I don't believe it's coming from them, but there are apartments there where people tend to dump their grease down, and as it gets further away, it tends to solidify a little bit more, which in turn raises the flow of the pipe.
So if we put in that grease trap inspection plan that you were talking about, that would be helpful. But I would like to get out the point that I think our businesses were thrown under the bus on that grease thing, and I think we jumped to some assumptions on that. So I'd like to clarify that.
Yeah, I don't believe it's just, like I say, I don't believe it's just businesses, even homeowners that dump in their frying pan grease down the sink, turn on the hot water, let it go, goes down the pipe, and in the end it solidifies, creates a problem for everybody, so.
Yeah, I spoke to a plumber about that. Apartment buildings are significantly higher in their grease release, if you will. So, yeah.
Because of density.
That, and they don't own the home. It's just a little, anyway.
Any benefit into cammering or testing more of the pipe? If we continue to work down, because it's obviously backing up at some point, I think you mentioned 160 feet or 300 and some feet. Is there a benefit to going further down to where it would start backing up? Just go as far down the pipe as we can to see where
We did do that this time. The one company actually ran from where we left off on the Sylvan Circle project. He ran back as far as he could to that building. There was one joint, I can't remember, I want to say it was on the Sylvan Circle side. There was a little bit of an issue there. I don't remember right off the top of my head, I guess, what there was, but he said there was an issue there. It could have been debris in the pipe, which could be gravel from construction that didn't get cleaned out very well. Could have been grease, you know, I don't remember right off the top of my head what that was, but there was some issue.
Because I guess the way I think about it, it's just so weird that it's one company or one residence having issue that, you know, if you start there and then you work your way down to the next business or company that is not in the line of the path, if they're not having issues, then it's got to be somewhere between there, right? And I just don't know how far away that is and whether it makes sense to go down that far to keep checking to see if we can find the issue. Because if at the end of the day, this cost analysis and project analysis comes back and we're talking the hundreds of thousand incremental costs to the city and the residents, it might make more sense just to pour a couple more thousand in here to see if we can identify the root cause of it and find it.
Hey, Raleigh, isn't that a lower area though too, elevation wise? I mean, that's what.
It gets pretty flat there. I mean, it's not that it's lower. You know, there are businesses up to the south that are a little higher elevation. Steakhouse, they're on that. So they're kind of about the same elevation as yours, probably a little bit higher. But with the basement, you know, that creates a little more of a low spot, I should say. But it shouldn't affect your business like it does. Like I say, I'm at a loss for what causes it. And if I get a call, somebody says usually the only person that calls, and I've seen it backed up even further, like say from Sylvan Circle around, nobody else has called except him. And there are homes that have basements, full basements under them too. So it's kind of
defies logic.
Yeah, it's baffling me, I guess, for lack of a better word.
I just want to clarify too, that the council meeting last time when we discussed that, we had talked to the owners and knew that we were going to be talking about it at the council meeting, so we were just trying to present as much information as we could, and our intent wasn't to blame any businesses that were on this service, it was just to make sure that everybody knew what services were on this line. It just so happens that 3 of them are restaurants, and like I said, it wasn't our intent to point any fingers at any one person and say that it was that issue, because we were talking about videoing it and putting a cost estimate together for a construction project, and so we were just throwing as much information in there as we could.
I appreciate that, Paul. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Any other discussion? That being said, that is the last item on the agenda for tonight. Yes, ma'am. Can you turn your mic on, Barb?
Can we bring that, that road off of Holly, I don't know what the street is, on the agenda next time? Do we have any information on that? The one where we're having trouble getting out onto Holly?
Are you talking about the email that we got today?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the company SEH that's doing the traffic study was delaying the traffic counts because of some other reasons, but weather is certainly one of them. We don't want to be doing it in the middle of a snowstorm. So their intent was to do them the week of February 5th, which is this week.
Are there any other items before the council tonight?
Do we have executive?
That being said, I'll be looking for a motion for adjournment.
Make a motion to adjourn. Second.
Motion from Hausman, second from Wells to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
We are out.